not going to limit this to just cinema of the subcontinent or cinema of Asia. We will talk about cinema as being a product of patriarchal cultural values and the positioning of women within that context. Seema, you've been part of a process whereby women have been placed before the camera. The gaze that looks upon them is the male gaze. And the process that we have experienced, I as an actor in front of the camera, you as a director behind the camera, I'm talking about the process of objectification in which a woman, a human being, a person, is rendered without humanity and becomes an object, whether it is for the purpose of advertising soap, cooking oil, even tractors and fertilizer. A woman becomes an object. Do you feel that you personally and professionally have been involved in any endeavor to change that in the kind of drama that has been produced at the channel where you are calling the shots?
I think we belong to that fraternity. I would happily say that I have voiced my resentment against stereotypical imaging of women on television at least, and in drama, and even in novels and in books. Because we belong to a very patriarchal, feudal, let's say, ethnically driven society. When Pakistan was made, the portions that became Pakistan, all the provinces, they had feudal, tribal cultures, and they were governed by sardars and vaderas and the landed people. All of these people came into power when elections happened. All of them came into power and took positions of authority. Now, living in such an atmosphere, it was in the 60s and 70s that the film and television were very influenced by the cultural dominance of men. So in the 60s and 70s, I think from the 50s onwards, 50s, 60s and 70s, all film, all television showed the male patriarch as a domineering, almighty head of family or clan. But that has phased out now. And now the younger filmmakers have, on the contrary, they've ridiculed such images and such characters. If you see the contemporary film, they may be very superficial and they may be very shallow in content, but they haven't created monsters out of men who are landed men or out of powerful men. So they don't do that anymore. As far as women go, we haven't yet decided how we want to portray the woman. The female writer of television drama is primarily and at large a housewife who has grown up reading novels of yesterday, which were written as family dramas. So she is greatly influenced by the same techniques and a methodology of writing drama. Today in Pakistan, which hasn't changed for the last many years in terms of behavior of men and the powerful towards women. Today we are looking at a huge number of rapes and a huge number of ill treatments to women. So it is time that television, primarily television and film, took upon themselves to create the iconic woman. They have to change, there has to be a role reversal. There has to be a woman who is confident, who is confident of herself, who has self-esteem, and who has discovered her own capabilities, her own potential. And she must be made the new heroine. She must be someone who can stand up for herself and who can defy the status quo, and who can speak out for herself and for other women.
I'd like to know from perhaps my sister furthest away from here, Annie, whether you face the same kind of constructions, who are dependent, women who cannot articulate their innermost desires, who are not allowed to have those desires.
I think it is a global problem, and it's demonstrated quite clearly in Hollywood with the number of initiatives that women there are trying to take. I mean, the Gina Davis Institute's probably the most obvious one. In Australia, it certainly was the problem. Like Seema, I've been around for a while and seen a lot of changes in Australia. On top of that, I gather that Australian women are seen internationally as some of the most strident feminists, perhaps taking after Germaine Greer, who established the gender so many years ago. I think there have been huge changes in terms of we've had a lot of policy decisions about this. I mean, at the moment, we actually have a major initiative from Screen Australia, our largest, our major film board, to actually look at the role of women in films. And I think we're going through another kind of phase of affirmative action in that sense, that we are actually looking very carefully. This follows close on the heels of another area, and I'd like to just expand very briefly. I mean, the idea of film, at least, and stereotyping. Film, the very nature of film is, of course, to tell stories in shorthand, and the difference between shorthand and stereotypes is a very fine line unless you're very careful and do the kind of nuancing. But we've embarked on a very major project in Australia in terms of Indigenous filmmaking, and if we want to go to Indigenous women, that's even a more detailed discussion. But I think that through policy and action, our Australian Indigenous filmmakers have really come to the fore. One of them won the Camera d'Or in 2009, which is actually a major achievement. And I think the same thing is happening with women's stories, but it's a very, very slow process. I suppose that the only way you can get women's voices in there is to actually include them in the process. And I'd actually expand it beyond the writing, the directing, etc., as a programmer to exhibition, and including women more in that process has been something that's been very important. Obviously, I'm an example, but the inclusion of women who can just insert their voices into what's selected, what's screened, what's produced, and we do have a number of very major female producers. So I think we've gone a long way, but there's still quite a way to go.
We have extremely powerful women characters in the cinema of Iran. So Fatima, my question to you is that in the policy of the Iranian state, the Iranian government, do you feel it is difficult to produce images of women who are strong and who are independent and who are not afraid, who do not have fear?
In my idea and in my film, always I will try to not judge, not separated between woman and man. If we start for show like a community, like a simple way for we can have a contact, we can have common points found, and it's not difference. I'm be woman in Asia, I'm be woman in another world. You can see in all of the world, women have a problem and speak about cinema's problem with women, and women again come out and say something about history of her work. I think we have just two choices. Existing structure of women is to build if you want build, if you want grow up, it's our nature. We can show the world positive things and try for solve a problem in our result. We are not fight. We are weekend women. I mean, we made and grow up like a culture, like a history, and you can see in your country, for example, Benazir Bhutto do it with the power. And I can say just as a woman filmmaker, we must return to come back to our nature. We can repair everything in the artistic way. And I know it's hard, but politics and society in the history shows cannot against us. We have a good way for art, and art is a power for us. And I think it's not different women where they live, Asia, Europe, everywhere. We have a soul of earth and soul of culture and soul of history. And I don't want to show happy ending and this exaggerate. But I try in my film that found a way between stones like water, like our nature, for solving points, small points, and after another step, another problems, slowly, and I think it's our nature and our blood.
Is that possible, given the power of commercial cinema, particularly in the country where the largest number of films are produced in a year, the vast majority of them celebrating the victimhood of women? I put this question to my sister from India.
For me, I would say the freedom of choice is probably the biggest thing you can give a woman. If a woman wants to confine herself to domesticity, I think I shouldn't use the word confine. I should say that it's her choice. If a woman wants to go and become a police officer, I would say it's her choice. If a woman wants to be an artist, it's her choice. And I would put this forward, even talking about men, that this freedom of choice is actually something that I really stand for. And I do feel that we do have alternate perspectives. Of course, in India, we do struggle with making our voice heard because we are constantly competing with the mainstream. That is definitely a challenge. But, you know, I ask myself sometimes that if you do make your alternate film, how do you exhibit it? So I do think that while we are expressing ourselves, we also have to understand that we need to find ourselves an audience. If we want to survive, we need to educate people about the freedom of choice. We need to educate people that it is not about being a woman filmmaker, it is actually about being a filmmaker. I hate the question that, you know, I am often subjected to when they turn around and tell me that, we really appreciate your film. Though you're a woman filmmaker, you've spoken about, I mean, what does this word though even mean? So I think while I do champion the cause of women moving forward and women film festivals dedicated to women-oriented cinema, I do feel that we need to get out of this prism of distinction. So we need to experience a level of freedom on the personal front, and then it will gradually come out in our cinema. So I think it's actually a double-edged sword, this one.
What we face here is a world where most women do not have the choice. It is not a choice for women to be domesticated as if they were not capable of anything else. It is not as simple as the Constitution of the United States, which allows for freedom of expression, where you can denigrate a person from a different race because you are free to do so. It is not about that. It is about opportunity. It is different. It's not the same as choice. Most women in our country do not have opportunities. And therefore, when people with opportunity, such as myself or you, are given that opportunity to craft a message, to craft an image, we do it with responsibility. I want to draw in my sister from Bosnia, Milana. Do you have the freedom to create any story?
Yes, we have a freedom. Yes, we have a freedom. Actually, Bosnia is a very patriarchal country, but in culture field, we have a freedom. There are no censure.
Can you address topics such as rape?
Only in politics we have censure.
Yeah.
But in
so on
fields, we
television, can you discuss rape?
Yeah, we can find idea about what we can write or film and anything. Every door is open to women, I think more than our men, because I don't know, I can speak from my side because I am a man, and everywhere I work, every door was open for me. And I think that more women in Bosnia has the same experience because our society respects women, and we have great filmmakers in Bosnia and 2 Oscar winners, but men, not women.
So the Oscar winners were men, not women, not women. So we hope that perhaps you will be one of the women who wins an Oscar from Bosnia. We have 2 women with us from Korea. As young Korean filmmakers, Kim, do you feel that you have the freedom to explore that part of your history? There was a part which has only recently been spoken about, the provision of sexual services to the Japanese Army of Occupation, Korean women referred to as comfort women. Do you have the freedom to express your concerns about women who are sexually exploited by an army of occupation?
As a Korean woman, the issue is very serious, and we still have victims who survived. The old ladies who's nearly near get to 100 years old, and most of the victims are died. And still every Wednesday, if you go to Seoul, they gathering every week and talking about their own story and want to get apologize from Japan. But it's a little bit political now because they don't accept it. And the last president, when we had the President Park, they got money for apologizing, but they never say apologize. But anyways, they paid back, so it's getting complicated now.
Do you feel that you could possibly play a role in projecting women as being invested with power and not powerless women who are used as objects of fulfillment or objects of desire?
Well, most of the Korean films, including K-dramas, they make a woman character in very independent way, but sadly, still most popular storyline and plot is based in Cinderella. You know, the Cinderella is very independent in a poor situation. Still, she worked really hard, and she really didn't mean to find a prince, but somehow prince find her and they get married. Both of them made a story with the prince transformed to the goblin, had her even superpower, wealthy, everything. But the female character, who's individual and they're very talented, but still kind of rescued by this character. But also we have another story in Biseng that's based in office drama, and they start to make a realistic life, like such as in society, Korean women can do anything. We can do judge, doctor, teacher, artist, or whatever. If they want to be housewife, they can be housewife, but it's all their own choice. So in this office drama, they made main character as a woman. She's most talented. She overcome every other man's. Most smart girl in the character. But still, she kind of blocked from like invisible glass shields on top, because in the previous generation, all the men is the boss. So she cannot get through the shield. So they show all this in very real, so we can talk about this problem. And also in society, like when the women get promoted, they get lots of responsibility in the work. So they need to stuck at work, but also usually they have another duty as a wife and a mother. So they feel guilty to stuck in the work. So they show those kind of the rules in the drama, in the films. So we also need to double consider in the society, we need to change the government rules to find more double cares about it.
So I urge a rethinking of this notion. It becomes very difficult when you are faced with life and death situations in our countries, and not just the Asian countries. Australia has many, many serious issues with women being murdered and the issue not being addressed. Would you like to say something after I've included my last? Oh, Annie? Yeah, if it's something pressing.
Well, I think you're very astute there, and it's really interesting that you've observed that. We do have a huge record of violence against women. The issue in sport, in the sporting circles, is one. And I mean, it isn't so long ago. These days, rape is taken a little more seriously, but it really, in my younger days, it was considered that you had asked for it. Maybe your clothing was wrong, maybe you were in the wrong space, whatever. It wasn't put back to any kind of social issue. So I think we're just maybe 10 years ahead of anywhere, of Pakistan perhaps. It's a little better, but it's really, these issues still continue to be a major problem. And sporting issues is particularly one. Because they're our heroes, and if something happens within that kind of environment, people are very reluctant to see their heroes brought down, because the women were perhaps hanging around in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah.
I'd like to hear your story, Jinnah. You've been actually organizing these important film festivals. I've always wanted to be involved in, Busan, the one that you were a programmer for. Can you explain to me the process by which you make your choices?
Comparing it with the regular company and the film festival in Korea, there are a little bit different system. It's a company, they have a kind of rule, and there are lots of bosses, mostly men. But in the film festival area, so we can have a more chance to have a making have a chance, and to and also having a chance to make new programs and new opportunities in film festival area. And also another situation is in film festival is very hard to find the man staff because it's most film festival, they cannot support whole year salary. So yeah, mainly the man staff is not, if they want to get married, they have to prepare lots of money for this, and also they have to earn the money a lot. But for women, if she doesn't want to get married, or she just want to work hard, she can have a chance in the film festival organization. So I'd like to stay, and then I'd like to have a chance more. I want to improve my ability, and I try to do also, nowadays I also programming, but I also did about the publicity area, and also I worked, it's a little bit hospitality team. So I'm working with the program, and also, yes, I can do anything what I want. So it's a very refreshing for me, and I can do anything in the film festival. So I still do my work.
Thank you. That gives us a context of, you know, why you are where you are. But because you are where you are, do you try to push the barriers that have been in place against women filmmakers? They were, you know, for a long time, cinema produced by women was not given mainstream platforms. So are you taking this opportunity, since it is an opportunity, to perhaps engage women filmmakers to showcase their work on international platforms?
I'd like to explain before explaining about the women director in Korea. Mostly commercial films. Independent film area, we have a lots of support program by the Korean Film Commission or the Provincial Film Commission. They have a lots of program about the support filmmaking, shorts and features and documentary. But there is no barrier about the sex, the female or male. But in the commercial films, the big company they cared about the number of the audience, so they try to give a chance to male director. It's a kind of problem in the commercial filmmaking area nowadays in Korea.
A very important aspect of television in Pakistan is the revenue that is generated by entertainment. It's interesting that we have a person who owns a channel sitting next to me and a person who writes for different channels. To what extent is this a pressure on you when you write and when you choose to present certain images, certain stories? Do your producers expect the formulation of certain kinds of women characters, female characters?
It is so traditional and it's centuries old that when a woman tries to subvert those values, she's always been victimized because you're subverting the core value system of a society. So I was not only victimized by the producers or the channel owners or the audience, I was victimized by my very immediate family. I would say my mother, because she was very uncomfortable. My things were not an easy watch. And it was actually challenging the patriarchy around her. And she was so uncomfortable that why would I write those things? Where are those coming from? So, and I am born in a society where a woman is considered as irrational. That is, that she's not even capable of rationality. So that would take, I don't know how many more centuries to reverse. But the screen, be it television or cinema, has the capacity and the energy and the strength to reverse this role of patriarchy in any society out there in the world. But the commercial value that has been attached, as Seema ji is sitting here, and she's one of the very few channel owners I know would never bend down and say, Kiji, I have to support the patriarchal subjects. But there are very few women, unfortunately, who are running the channel, who are very empowered women in a sense that they have their own channel. Would just tell me that, oh, this is what you want to write, this is what you think you're going to bring to our screen, and then you wear a sari, you must be very intellectual. So I said, yes, I am intellectual even if I wear a pair of jeans because I have a thinking mind. It's a very tough struggle, but I do not I do not agree that we should stop producing such subjects or scripts or stories. I don't care if there is only one viewer or audience there to listen to what I have to say. When I was coming and I met one of my male friends out there who happens to be a writer also, and I just asked him, how is it going? He says, just as any of your TV shows running, no one is there. So that's what it is. So the TRPs, the ratings, the commercial value attached to it has dampened my efforts at times. But you know, I am there as a warrior that I have to speak up because I had been victimized as a woman in this society. And I have been, you know, the whole traditional ideology that has been passed on over to me, to pass it on to my next generation, at least I refuse to do that. So that's how it is.
Society in the process of evolution from 20th century to 21st century is fast changing. One of the reasons of men's dominance, of course, I've talked about the exploitative systems, but there has been another history of the reasons of a man's power to exploit was that the whole production system in the society is a Marxist concept that the production or a human's relationship with the production system determines the level of someone's importance. So earlier, because of the lack of technology, lack of development, lack of progress in science and technology, the main power for production was muscle. Man's muscle, naturally that was the more powerful. But now it is mind power, it is intellect, it is technology. So with the growth, with the progress, man has no future if he does not recognize the power of women. So if we want to progress, we have to recognize the power of women, because my muscle being a man is going to become kind of redundant. It is technology, knowledge, science and everything, and mind power and intellect, which is going to help the humanity or humankind to grow and survive. So with this construct of women's power, man can survive and humanity can survive. And that is how I would say women should be portrayed.
Thank you so much, Sir Glenn.